Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Recently, we asked some people about sharing their New York Times accounts.
My name is Dana. I am a subscriber to the New York Times, but my husband isn't. And it would be really nice to be able to share a recipe or an article or compete with him in Wordle or Connections. Thank you.
Dana, we heard you. Introducing the New York Times Family Subscription. One subscription, up to 4 separate logins for anyone in your life. Find out more at nytimes.com/family.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. President Donald Trump unleashed a strange Truth Social rant on Wednesday, declaring straight out that farmers are getting hurt because China is not buying soybeans. Of course, Trump's own trade wars are the reason for this, so in effect he admitted that his own policies are badly screwing one of his core constituencies. That's amusing, but it also comes as some brutal economic news landed, suggesting job losses could be about to get worse. The bigger story here is that the bad economic news is piling up at exactly the moment we're entering a bruising government shutdown fight, and of course a shutdown will make the economy even worse. So does that mean Trump and Republicans will be in a weak enough position for Democrats to hold the line in the shutdown battle? We're talking about all this with New Republic senior editor Alex Shepard, who has a good new piece arguing that Democrats are finally finding some spine in this fight. Alex, good to see you, man.
It's great to be back.
So let's start with Trump's post on Truth Social. Here's what he said, quote, "The soybean farmers of our country are being hurt because China is, for negotiating reasons only, not buying. We've made so much money on tariffs that we are going to take a small portion of that money and help our farmers," close quote. Alex, note how Trump says China isn't buying soybeans for negotiating reasons, but leaves out how we got to this point, which is Trump's trade wars. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's also funny that he puts negotiating in inverted commas as if there's some other possible meaning for that word. But I mean, this shouldn't have come as a shock at all. I think one of the things that I found most surprising about this is I was looking at a piece on Politico's agriculture newsletter, because, of course, they have a newsletter for everything. And in it, they had reporting saying, in effect, that the Trump White House had been taken aback by the response from soybean farmers who are being crushed by these tariffs. China has bought nothing for basically the entirety of the year. And what was shocking about that is that this happened in Trump's first term, too. When Trump started a trade war against China to a less significant degree, Trump took it out on soybean farmers. So not only is this, absurd, it's also crazy that no one in the Trump administration could have seen this coming. And now they're clearly scrambling. Trump is promising to rub some pennies together from the tariffs that he's bringing in. But I think this is just yet another sign that this trade war, he's doubled money from tariffs, but what it's doing to the actual American economy is devastating for a lot of people, many of whom are Trump voters.
Yeah, and Alex, it's worth noting that this is a real calamity for those farmers. China bought over $12 billion worth of soybeans last year, and this year it's nothing. And also, to your point, when Trump says he will pay off the farmers with money from tariffs, well, that money was actually collected from importers who passed on higher costs to consumers who also happen to be Trump voters, or many of them are anyway. He's basically admitting he's really screwing his own people here. He's taking money from some of his own people, and he's going to give it to others to mask the deep, failure of his policies.
It's not just that, though, too. I mean, the stated rationale for this tariff policy has shifted somewhat, but at its foundational base, it's that it's supposed to rebuild American enterprise, manufacturing, that it's supposed to make Americans wealthy by building up their ability to make things, right? So I think the other thing that's so absurd about this is that you have an actual successful industry. There is really no market for domestic American soybeans. If you're an American soybean farmer, you sell them to foreign markets, most notably China. And so I think what you have here too is like an example of just how ridiculous this entire stratagem is, that Trump is essentially like taking existing successful American industries that do export goods, in this case, soybean farmers, and holding them hostage so he can, one, extort the rest of the world in the form of tariffs and claim that he's making all this money, but also, two, to like build up successful American industry or farming, manufacturing, whatever you want to call it. And what you have here is an actual successful thing. It's being destroyed. And, there's nothing that this administration can point to that's being built domestically because of these tariffs.
And just to underscore the depths of the scamming here, Trump constantly says that other countries pay the tariffs. No, they don't. We do. His own voters do. And on top of all this, the economic news is getting worse. ADP just put out its report finding that the economy lost 32,000 jobs in September. That's the worst since March of 2023. They also revised the August numbers down from 54,000 gained to a loss of 3,000 jobs. A new report also finds that consumer confidence has dipped in September. You've got the farmers getting clobbered. Now the government shutdown. It sure seems like the bad economic news is really going to pile up on Trump right now. What's your reading of that overall picture? How bad is it?
I mean, I think it's been pretty bad for a while. I mean, I think that consumer sentiment has been a sort of leading indicator for quite a while now, and it hasn't always meant kind of bad economic news. But I think, you always had a situation where you had the vibe session, right, during the Biden administration. And I think a lot of, talking to a lot of sort of Dem policy people, I think that was always misjudged to some extent, because you could point to a lot of good numbers during the Biden administration, but at the same time, there was inflation. There were kind of various things that made you feel like your dollar was being stretched more. And I think what you have now is a situation where you have this sort of tariff-related inflation that's happening at the same time as there are bad fundamental numbers, which was not true 2 or 3 years ago. And those things, I think, are really starting to compound each other right now. I just think that the general sort of economic mood, just talking to regular people too, is really, really bad. And that's now starting to be borne out with these numbers. I think that the effects of the shutdown are going to start to show too. And, I think the only thing that's kind of holding the line right now is the markets, who have shown a kind of almost religious faith in Trump, or at least that have said, and as long as things don't fall off a cliff, right? As long as you don't have the economic version of the AI video of the lady, crashing a rock into a bridge or whatever, then they'll stick with the guy. But I think even that may start to crumble now. I think just the general sort of the mood plus the underlying numbers are combining in this way that we really haven't seen since the start of the pandemic, or maybe even since, the fall of 2008.
And Trump is in a very weakened state. The New York Times poll this week, which actually had somewhat better news for Trump in terms of his overall approval than most other polls, it also showed Trump getting killed on the economy. 54% of voters disapprove of his handling of it versus 44% who approve. And get this, 58% of independents disapprove. That's very bad. Independents are going to be critical in the midterms. Alex, it seems like Trump is very poised to take the blame for a government shutdown, given all those underlying weaknesses. I mean, he's out there telling his own voters that he's going to have to hand them cash to make them whole after his policies killed them. I mean, I think this gives Democrats an opportunity to hold the line. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, too, is that, traditionally the way that this works is that, the party that withholds its consent to keep the government open gets blamed. But what you have here is a very different situation, right? I think that the Democratic offer, right, which is essentially to keep the government open in exchange for extending Affordable Care Act subsidies, some rollback of the cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and an assurance that you're not going to not spend, funds allocated from Congress in the future. That really just rolls back to an ask of saying, if you extend these ACA subsidies, we'll reopen the government. That's really pretty reasonable. And I think that the fact is that, if Trump wanted to, he could reopen the government by spending 2 hours on the phone, right? Any day this week, any day next week. It could just happen. He's choosing to keep the government closed because he doesn't feel like doing that. And I think that that's one of the things that I think is actually already apparent to a lot of people, that, this is a president who doesn't actually want to do the work of governing, right? He doesn't care about making the economy function for people. He's on this kind of weird side quest all the time, either with the tariffs or, again, in the case of the shutdown, you had the news today that they're going to continue construction of the White House ballroom, right? I think that there's this whole, this absurd idea that is running through this government that, whatever Trump wants is what his voters want. And that may be true for more people than I would like for it to be true. But if you're, running a government that is dependent on the consent of the governed, right, there's just not enough people to do that. And I think that dam is actually already started to crack before this moment. And the fact that all of this is just kind of compounding at the same time is really, really bad for Republicans.
To stay up to date on all the news that you need to know, there's no better place than right here on the DSR Network. And there's no better way to enjoy the DSR Network than by becoming a member. Members enjoy an ad-free listening experience, access to our Discord community, exclusive content, early episode access, and more. Use code DSR2025 for a 25% off discount on sign up at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you and enjoy the show.
I'm really glad you underscored Trump's fundamental laziness, which I think is lost on a lot of people. He hates the act of governing. He hates the details. He's not a reader. He obviously can't stand sitting still for long enough that it takes to actually learn what Obamacare subsidies actually are. Like a 3-year-old can look at his public rhetoric about this situation, the subsidies, ending, and see that he has absolutely no clue whatsoever what the details are. What's so bizarre to me about it as well is that the Obamacare subsidies problem is going to absolutely clobber Trump voters as well. We're talking about premiums going up for millions of Trump voters across the country. That plus the farm country getting absolutely slaughtered by his tariffs. To your piece, in which you kind of wrote about Democrats finding a spine, Democrats, to their great discredit, have constantly acted as if Trump is kind of an invincible political figure. They've imbibed the Beltway punditry that treats him that way, that treats him as sort of a master of political events at all times, no matter how bad things get for him. But it does seem, as your piece captures, like there might be a bit of a shift where Democrats are starting to really sense real weakness on Trump's part. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're seeing, too, is a possibility of the shutdown really reminding voters of the sort of authoritarian aspects of this presidency that they have not really responded to in terms of public opinion polling, right? So you've seen, I mean, obviously the voters that care deeply about this are many of our readers, your regular MSNBC types have cared about this for a while, but that has been a message that I think that Dems have struggled to get out to sort of, median voters, independents, et cetera. And I think that Trump's, kind of obstinance here is kind of underrated, that, it's a refusal to open the government, but also that means that it's a government that is being run however he and Russ Vought want to run it, right? So Russ Vought is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and he's, probably the third most powerful person in the Trump White House behind the president and Stephen Miller right now, or at least since Elon Musk's exit. He is the, kind of author and chief architect of Project 2025. He's a kind of pretty standard movement conservative in a lot of ways, is sort of he was at Heritage before he entered the Trump administration. He served in the first Trump administration too. And I think where Vogt is really smart is that, he has a lot of old-timey Heritage Foundation-y goals of shrinking the federal government as much as he can, of kind of waging this larger war on the administrative and regulatory state. And he has sold this to Trump by essentially painting it in Trumpian terms. So he said, your first term would have been really successful, but, the entire government bureaucracy is full of liberals who are secretly thwarting you. So he's kind of extended Trump's deep state argument, which is really, I think, in the first term focused mostly on kind of people at the DOJ and FBI, these kind of, law enforcement agencies, and extended it across the federal government. By most reporting, he was pretty upset with Elon Musk's, kind of slash and burn approach and wants to take a more targeted one. And he's kind of sold himself over the last few months saying, if you give me the opportunity to cut the federal budget or to, cut the federal workforce in a shutdown, like I've been studying how to do this for years and I will wreak havoc. And, that was enough to scare Schumer away from doing it in March. But he started to slowly roll out what he plans on cutting in terms of federal spending as of Wednesday, October 1st.
Well, how do you see this all playing out exactly, Alex? Your piece seemed to suggest that you think Democrats might have, discovered some sort of backbone in themselves to the point where they may actually try to draw this out. What should they do now? And what are the prospects for that working over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, not to bring it back to Vogt quickly, but I think that you can see sort of how they respond in the actions he took on Wednesday, which is he cuts this big infrastructure project in New York and New Jersey. Well, what's happening in New Jersey right now? It's a pretty important gubernatorial race that's also pretty close. And I think that, you can see in the way that they're going to do this shutdown, which is slow rolling these kind of cuts, right? $15 billion to New York here. They cut $8 billion to green energy there. Tomorrow it'll be another $20 billion. And I think Democrats can use these cuts to actually remind people of what it is the Trump administration is doing here. And to your point about the law breaking, I think that the more power that Trump and Vogt take for themselves during the shutdown, because you don't have Congress there telling them not to do anything, the more you can draw attention to that aspect of this presidency as well. I mean, I think this is going to be a long shutdown. I think the Dems have given, a pretty clear off-ramp, but there's just no way that I think Trump takes it for a little while unless he's absolutely made to take it. And, I think that this is going to be ugly, but it's headed right now towards a position that I think Dems have quite a bit of leverage, more than they've had at any point this year.
But Alex, do they know that?
No, of course not.
That's the critical question, right?
Yeah. And I think that that's the issue, is that I think that you could easily see, you already have 3 votes that have sort of defected, right? You could easily see the caucus start to erode and Schumer just kind of throwing in the towel because they don't have the stomach to deal with it. I think what they should be reminded of is, like, the last time that Republicans shut down the government, they gained 7 Senate seats, right? This is the 2014 midterms. And I think that, that voters have a short memory, right? If they're worried about the midterms for this, then it's just way too far away from right now. What they need to think about is the short-term effect of bringing down Trump's popularity and communicating to voters what this administration is doing. I think they're putting their own long-term concerns about the way that voters see the Democratic Party and, their health going into the midterms ahead of the cart right now. The cart is just to damage this administration right now.
Oh, it's such a critical point, and I'd like to unravel it a little more. Trump's approval is the coin of the realm. Driving his approval rating down is the name of the game. That's what everything should be oriented around. And frankly, I think Democrats have kind of gotten their heads a little spun around by the way our political media discourse works. Anytime anybody points out that Trump's approval is in the absolute toilet, and it is in the absolute toilet, somebody quickly rushes in, and mainstream reporters as well, someone rushes in to say, oh, but Democrats are also really in terrible shape. And so I think the effect of that sort of constant drumbeat of negativity about Dems, and just to be clear, the approval rating of Democrats is less important than the approval rating of the president when it comes to the midterms. That's just how politics works. And so this kind of constant rush to say, well, Dems are also in a terrible position, sort of has spun them to the point where they don't actually keep focused on the prize, which is Trump's approval going down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the other reason why it's stupid is just that the main reason that the Democratic approval rating looks so bad is that their own base is furious with the party right now, right? That you have a lot of sort of committed Democratic voters who are saying that they disapprove of the way that the party is handling Trump, right? So the idea that somehow should affect their shutdown strategy is absurd, right? I mean, you could argue that it gets to the complexity of the problem that they're facing and that they have to, appease the base while also winning over voters who, think that they're too focused on identity issues or whatever. But I just think that it doesn't matter, right? With the Democratic approval rating doesn't matter now. It will matter maybe in 6 months or so, but the overall landscape for the midterms, you look at something like the special election that happened last week in Arizona, right? Democrats romped to victory there. I think that the overall health of the party, in terms of like winning back one chamber of Congress, looks fine, right? What they need to do if they want to win back both is to drive down Trump's approval rating, and they're not going to do that unless they shut down the government right now and get something in return.
Yeah, and just to go big picture, every single piece of data we see, everything we're seeing in our politics points to a dynamic which is typical for a midterm after a party loses the White House, in which that party is strengthened, emboldened, invigorated, angry. There's just no reason to think the dynamics are, in some sense, going to be, rendered inoperable by Trump's kind of magical political powers or whatever it is that pundits seem to see in him. Democrats are in a position to win the House back, and they're in a position to take advantage of Trump's weakness right now. I just don't know if they know it.
One of the things I found disheartening was the sort of idea of the sort of ACA off-ramp, right? I think it does make the party seem very reasonable, but what it also suggests is that, this was not a shutdown that, Schumer and Jeffries were angling for, right? That they were telegraphing this administration the entire time that they would accept very little in return to keep the government open. Now, I think that's sort of played into their hand here. And you now have this sort of bizarre environment where, their ask was very simple, but now, Jeffries in particular is just pissed off because of these racist sombrero videos. And Trump is just refusing to dig in. Republican senators don't want to do this because it's got, Obama in quotation marks somewhere in the bill with the subsidies. But, you're staring down a long shutdown here, and it's not clear that Schumer or Jeffries were prepared for that, but they better gear up because that's where we're headed.
I think ultimately what the real story here is that Trump's pathologies are going to force Democrats to take the right position.
Yeah.
Alex Shepard, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you, man. Thanks for running through all that with us.
Thanks. It's fun.